Gemara Yevamot Daf Memtet. Our Masechet is being studied for the Refuah Shelema Shimon ben Simcha. Elna Refanalo Betok She'ar Chole Amo Yisrael. Amen. We begin today's daf right on the top of Memtet, and we start from the Mishnah. Matnitin. Ezehu Mamzer. Okay, what makes a Mamzer? So here we're going to ultimately have three opinions in the Mishnah, then we'll have two more opinions in the Gemara. We're going to have 5 different opinions on what makes a mamzer. So number 1, Kol she'er basar shehu belo yavo, Devrei Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Akiva's shita is that you can have mamzerut even from a chibe lav, isur lo ta'aseh, but it's an isur lo ta'aseh of she'er. She'er means it's a forbidden relation, meaning a relative. She says, "Kol kurba she belab," any relative that is a lab. Afidu en bakaret. An example with that would be that she says anusat abiv, that if the father, let's say, went by force on a lady, so that's a isur lab, and therefore that lady is a sulab. It's not punishable by karet. It would bring a mamzer. Uchrabi Yehuda dahavya belab velo yigale kenaf abiv, and therefore umahmad kurba kigon noseh halutzato dahavu belo yibne, which means, or let's say, for example, a guy marries his halutza. Once you make halitza, you're not allowed to marry. It's shuv lo yibne. You're not allowed to rebuild the house after you destroyed it, and therefore that's considered also a lab that has kurba, because that's his sister-in-law, and therefore the deen is it's going to be bringing a mamzer. That's the first opinion of Rabbi Akiva. Shimon atimni omer kol shehayavim alav karet bidei shamayim v'halacha kedbarav. Shimon atimni says that the mamzerim only come from isur karet. So therefore, for example, if a person married his halutza, there's no karet on that. So therefore, they would not bring a mamzer. The Rabbi Yeshua Omer, that's the third opinion of the Mishnah. That's not enough that there is a lav. It has to be a mitat beddin, punishable by a death penalty. That would be considered, for example, eshet ish. Eshet ish is punishable by a death penalty, and therefore isurim like that. A person goes with his mother. Things like that have death penalty. So we have 3 opinions. You have isur lav b'she'er. Again, understand that good. Isur lav meaning from a relative. That's Rabbi Akiva. Then you have isur karet. That's Shimon atimni. And then you have chayuv mitat beddin. That's Rabbi Yoshua. The Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Azai, Matzati Megillat Yuhsin Yerushalayim. I found a Megillah, which is a document, a scroll that had lineage regarding the laws of lineage in Yerushalayim. V'chatuv ba ish peloni mamzer me'eshet ish. And it said, so-and-so is a mamzer. He came from eshet ish, because it was from a relationship of a married lady. Now, this was not written in Megillah, the Megillah. This is just the Mishnah's comment. Lekayem devrei Rabbi Yoshua. That is fulfilling the words of Rabbi Yoshua. Now, she says, Lo haya katuv Megillah ela aresha ka'eh. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Azai lekayem devrei Rabbi Yoshua. That's part of the Ishto shemeta. Now the Mishnah concludes. Let's say a person's wife dies. Then we say mutar ba'achota. So it's permissible for him to marry his wife's sister, which is the famous law that says that achota is only asur behayeha, in the life of his wife, of the sister. Girsha umeta mutar ba'achota. Now let's say he divorced his wife, and then she died, so it's permissible to marry her sister. What's the hadush in that? The hadush is that you would have thought that maybe after you divorce her, it's enough already that you could marry her sister. Kamash bala, no, divorce is not enough. Divorce plus she has to die. So the main thing is she has to die, not the divorce. Niset le'acher umeta mutar ba'achota. Let's say he got divorced from his wife and she got married to somebody else. So now you might have thought that since she's forbidden to you now, so therefore her sister should be permissible, because now you're not even allowed to go with her anymore because she got married to somebody else in between. Kamash, well, no, it's not enough. She has to die. That's the law. Only meta. Yibimto shemeta mutar ba'achota. Which means, let's say, is Yevama that died. Also the same thing. Shemeta mutar ba'achota. You can take her sister, just like a regular case where a person has a wife and his wife dies. So when it comes to Yibum, also it's going to be permissible as well. However, halatzla umeta, if let's say he made halitza on the lady and then she died, mutar ba'achota. Again, you would have thought that maybe just halitza enough is enough. Kamashmala, no, you need that she has to die in order to marry her sister. Niset la'acher umeta mutar la'achota. And then it says, let's say she got married to somebody else, meaning after he made halitza, and then she got married to somebody else and she died, mutar ba'achota. Again, the main thing is over here in all these cases, meta. Now the Gemara begins. Gemara, my ta'amad Rabbi Akiva. What's the reason for Rabbi Akiva? Again, Rabbi Akiva's opinion is mamzerim come from a lab of she'er, a lab that's connected to a relationship that's a relative. So the Gemara says, my ta'amad Rabbi Akiva nichtiv lo yikach ish et eshet aviv v'lo yigale kenaf aviv. This is going to be the subject of today's Gemara, this pasuk. Let's learn it good. What does it mean? Lo yikach ish, a person should not take et eshet aviv. Maze eshet aviv. Literally, it means his father's wife. V'lo yigale kenaf aviv, and he should not reveal the kenaf, the corner of his father. Maze corner of his father. Kenaf shira'a aviv lo yigale, which means ri'iyah lo yira'eh is a nice way of saying don't have tashmish. Lo yira'eh. It's a nice way of saying the kenaf is saying that normally something that is hidden, and therefore the pasuk is coming to say that the lady, that your wife, that your father went with, that you should not go with her. So the Gemara says, "V'sabar la keRabbi Yehuda de'amar ba'anusat abi v'katuv b'daber." Oh, what type of lady we're talking about? Not his father's real wife, ela anusat abi. Anusat abi is only be'isud lav. It's not be'isud karet. And what does the pasuk say right after that? De'havya lechibe lavin usmichle. And then it says right after that, lo yavo mamzer b'kal Hashem. Then it says lo yavo mamzer. So what do you see over here? That what we just said in the last pasuk, lo yigale kanaf, brings a mamzer. If we see alma mehaneh have mamzer, we see that this becomes mamzer. That she says over here, v'katuv lo yavo mamzer usmichle lo yigale. Very good. Now the Gemara says, "Ulavi simai de merabesh archibe lavin de lav desher." According to a rabbi called Rabbi Simai, that he says that it's coming to include other chibe lavim de lav desher, which means Rabbi Akiva holds, according to this rabbi, that not only lavim that are asud because of relationships, even lavim that are not connected to she'ed, he holds also is going to be asud. She says, what are we talking about? Urabi simai, Rashi beketubot, beketushin, minakol aya oseh Rabbi Akiva mamzerim. From all lavim, chutz ma'almana lekohen gadol, she'oseh halalim v'lo mamzerim. V'dekamar chutz ma'almana, the fact that he only excluded almana to kohen gadol, alma afilu chibe lavin, shelo mahmat kurba, marbe, kegon, mahzir girushato mishin niset. Exactly. Let's say a person takes his girusha back after she got married to somebody else. According to Rabbi Akiva Mishnah, that's a law, but it's not a law of she'er. It's not a law of forbidden relationship, meaning of a relative. It's his wife. And therefore, it's a sur. So according to Rabbi Simai, that's also included, which is not only a regular law, but even a law that's not of she'er. Uchgon nitina li Yisrael. Or let's say nitina. We know that the nitinim, we're not allowed to marry them. So therefore, let's say you have a nitina that marries Yisrael. It's Yisud lav, but it's not a Yisud lav of kurba. According to Rabbi Simai, it's still going to make a mamzer. The kaimar belot tatem bam, shvaomot, amoni. We know that a Yisrael cannot, a bat Yisrael cannot marry an amoni. Lo yavo amoni bekal Hashem. Fine, but that's not an isur kurba. That's an isur of relative. Rabotai, mazi isur kurba, mother, sister, etc. Relationships. Exactly, like it says in this week's parasha, and the parasha the haremot. That's isur kurba. Masechet, according to Rabbi Simai, not only isur kurba is asur, even stam lavin, and we gave examples. Amon marrying a bat Israel, or a Netina marrying a Ben Yisrael, etc. So it says that what? So according to the Bisimai, the Marbe She'ar, Hayvela bin the Lav the She'er, Ul Rabbi Yeshbab, as Rabbi Yeshbab, the Marbe Afilu Chibe Aseh. Rabbi Yeshbab says what? Even Chibe Aseh, even cases that are going to be asud in Mitzvat Aseh. What's that case? As she says, Mitzri or Adomi. We know that you're not allowed to take a Mitzri only after what? 3 generations. So it says, Kodem Gimel Dulam. What if you take him before 3 generations? It says, Dor Shilishi Yavo Lahen. It says only Dor Shilishi Yavo Lahen, implying what? That Dor Sheni Lo Yavo. And she says, Velo Sheni, Velav Haba Michlal Aseh Aseh. We have a law that any lav that you learned from an aseh is considered an aseh. Let's go slow. What does the pasuk say? Dor shilishi yavo lahem. That's aseh. Dor shilishi yavo. Now, what do we learn from there? Dor sheni lo yavo. So what does that come and teach me? Dor sheni, but it's not.
It's not logged into the right one.
Okay,
Hey guys, I don't know why. Wait, what did it say? Did it say allow join?
Recording in progress.
So he says over here, Dor Shilishi Yavo Lahem. What is Dor Shilishi Yavo Lahem? Implying that Dor Sheni Lo Yavo. So you're learning the Lo Ta'aseh Michlal Aseh. And we have a law that says that a Lo Ta'aseh that's learned from an Aseh is considered an Aseh. And therefore, Rabbi Yeshbab holds that what? So comes out we have 2 more shitot in Rabbi Akiva. We have one shita. Rabbi Akiva definitely holds Isur Lav. Makes a mamzer. That's for sure. The question is, what type of Isur Lav? So in the Mishnah, it's mashma Isur Lav de She'er. Isur Lav de She'er is Isur Lav of a relation. According to the Bisimai, it's Isur Lav afilu Lav de She'er. Isur Lav regularly, even if it's not a relationship. For example, an Ammoni marrying a Bat Yisrael. That's not a relation. That's asur as well. Or Ma'zi Gerushato. That's not a relation. That's just a Lav. And then you have the third opinion of Rabbi Akiva, which is even on a mitzvah aseh. Even on the mitzvah aseh. For example, if a person marries a 2nd generation mitzri, which is considered an aseh, also will make mamzerim. So the Gemara says, according to those opinions, how do they learn it? Why? What's the problem? The pasuk that they brought, Lo Yigale Kenaf Aviv, was talking about Anusat Aviv. Anusat Aviv is a lav of She'er. It's his father's Anusah. So how could they learn even lavim that are not of She'er? So the Gemara says, Nafkalehu Mevelo, because the pasuk says, Lo Yikach Ish et Eshet Aviv, Velo Yigale Kenaf Aviv. The Torah just could have said, Lo Yikach Ish et Eshet Aviv, Lo Yigale Kenaf Aviv. What does it have to come along and say Velo? That extra vav comes and says that not only the cases that we said, but even more cases are going to be included. So now, Rabotai, we have so far in our Gemara 3 opinions. We have 3 ways of learning Rabbi Akiva. Od Ba'am. Rabbi Akiva, lav de she'er, or it's lav, not only of she'er, even lav de she'er, or it's even a aseh. All those cases are going to bring mamzeri. Shimon Timni. Now Shimon Timni said what? No, only Isur Karet brings mamzer. Sabala Kirabanan. The Amre, this pasuk that says Kanaf Aviv, which we learned is talking about Anusat Aviv. But he says no. You know what it's talking about? ושומרת יבם של אביו הכתוב מדבר. We're talking about over here where the father's brother died. And now that lady falls to the father. She's considered the Shomeret Yavam of the father. And what is the Torah saying? Lo yigale kenaf aviv. That Shomeret Yavam, which is this guy's aunt. That's his father's brother's wife. We call that a aunt. Azaku Baruch. And therefore the Torah is coming to say you cannot go with the aunt. And we know that an aunt is Isur Karet. So that's how we know. ושומרת יבם של אביו, הכתוב מדבר, דהב ילה חיבה כריתות, וסמיך, then what does it say right after? לא יבוא ממזר, על מה? מחיבה כריתות אבי ממזר. So we have a מחלוקת how to learn כנף אביו. One way of learning כנף אביו was what? אנוסת אביו. If you learn like אנוסת אביו, it's only a lav. However, if you learn it, it's talking about a shomeret yabam, so that means it's talking about the girl that fell to the father in Yibum. Now, who to you, what is that? To the son, that's an ant. And we know that an ant, according to the Torah, is punishable by karet. Therefore, the Torah is coming along to say, Lo yigale kenaf aviv. You cannot go with that lady. And if you go with that lady, lo yavo mamzer. Therefore, we see that it's bechibe karet. Now the Gemara comes along and says, now we get to the fifth opinion of Rabbotai. Three opinions in Rabbi Akiva. I keep on repeating Rabbotai. Three opinions in Rabbi Akiva. One opinion now in Shimon HaTimni, and now we're going to get to the Rabbi Yoshua. The Rabbi Yoshua that says there's only mamzer where there's a chiben mitat bedin. So it says because if the pasuk is saying what, Lichtov Rahmana Lo yigale. Let the pasuk just come along and say Lo yigale kenaf aviv, which would come and tell me either way, either like Rabbi Akiva or according to Shimon HaTimni, Lo yikach lamri. What's the first part of the pasuk? Lo yikach ish et eshet aviv. What's that doing over there? What's that pasuk? What's the beginning of the pasuk over there? Which means we know the isur of eshet av. If it's Mamash's father's wife, we know that's already isur of not only isur karet, but that's the isur of mitat bedin. So therefore he comes along and says, El alav hachi ka'amar. Midlo yikach ad lo yigale habi mamzer. Tefer lo habi mamzer. I'll explain to you outside. We have two parts of the pasuk. Lo yikach ish et eshet aviv. That's the beginning. That's called the resha. Velo yigale kenaf aviv. Leave velo yigale. Put that on the side. Rabbi Yoshua disregards the end of the pasuk. He focuses mainly on the beginning. And what does the beginning say? Lo yikach ish et eshet aviv. Now we know if it's really eshet aviv, that's your father's legal wife. Now what's the law that if a son goes with his father's legal wife, that's a punishment by bedin. So he learns when it says lo yavo mamzer at the end, lo yavo mamzer is going on the resha of the pasuk, not the sefer. And therefore from there you're going to learn that what? That davka, when there's a mitat bedin, that's when there's going to be a mamzer. And therefore he has a more lenient opinion on mamzer. He's the most lenient of all the opinions. Only when there's a mitat bedin, but all those other cases, even a karet will not bring a mamzer according to Rabbi Yoshua. If you look at the Rashi says over here, ורבי יהושע לכתוב ורחמנא לא יגלה. כלומר, אי בשומרי יבם של אביו משתעה, או באנוסת אביו משתעה, whatever the מחלוקת is, that's the מחלוקת, how you learn לא יגלה. If לא יגלה is talking about אנוסת אביו, fine. If it's talking about שומרת יבם, fine. לא יגלה כרביו לחודב, ולשמין יש פה שם מחייבי כריתות. And I can learn, if it's Yibum case, שומרי יבם, I'll learn that there's mamzerut from חייבי כריתות. And if it's talking about Anusat Abid, then I'll learn Hibel Abid because Sheken Kiritut. So I can learn Karet from Lo Yigale. What do you have to tell me? Lo Yikach Ishet Eshet Abid. What do you have to tell me the Resha for? Lo Yikach Ishet Eshet Abid Lama Li Lemechtav El Ashma Mina Medikativ Akabashwa. The Lo Yavo Mamzer Ale Kaer. The Lo Yavo Mamzer is going on that part of the pasuk. The Minehu Davi Mamzer Mishum Daivem Mitotu. Mamzer is not going on the end of the pasuk. So now if that's the case, if you're telling me that there's only chibem mamzer on mitat bedin, and that's what the beginning of the pasuk was coming to tell me, lo yikach ish et eshet, I mean, it's his legal wife. You cannot go with your father's legal wife. So what's the end of the pasuk coming to teach me? Now we know already Shomeret Yabam is asur. So why does it have to say it again? To come and tell me that if you do, you're going to get 2 isurim, because it says it twice in the Torah. So then, for the end, Lo Yigaleh Keren Rabbi is going to come to say that if a guy went with Shomeret Yabam, he's going to get 2 isurim. Irvat Achi Abicha Lo Tegaleh, which we know already. You're not allowed to go with your father's brother's wife. That's called an aunt. So we have to say Lo Yigaleh for. How much are you going to get 2 punishments? And if you learn that talking about Anusat Abib, that's what we know it's Asud. How do you know Anusat Abib is Asud? You know it from that pasuk. Okay. Rabotai. Amar Abaye Hakol Modi. Now we get to the next place. Ba'al Hanida. Let's say a guy goes with a Nida. What's a Nida? A Nida. What's a Nida? That's a Nida. Ba'al Sota. What's a Sota? Sota is a lady that went with another man. She's married, and now she's a Sota. And the Torah says you're not allowed to be with that lady anymore. And you're not allowed to be with a Nida either. But the Hadush is that if a person goes with his wife who's a Nida, or he goes with his wife after she becomes a Sota, She'en Abalad Mamzer. Abotai, the law is that it does not make a Mamzer. Now, even though we have Isurim over here, that she says on the top, "Ve'habala sota eshet isha zinta." She committed zlut. Ve'kai malan asura lebala. She's forbidden to be with her husband. Ve'perekama ma ani mekayim asher utama'a lerabot sota shenistera ba'pagav de'chibei lavini. Even though it's chibei lav, and we just learned Rabbi Akiva says that chibei lavin, at least according to some of the rabbis, chibei lavin that's not she'ed is going to be considered what? Mamzerim. מודה ברבי עקיבא, דפליג עד רבן מנתים, ועושה גרושתו, וכמה עד הבלד, ממזר. אף אגב דלאו חייבי לבין תשארו. Which is, even though we said it's not a chiyuv of she'er, like we said according to one rabbi, that if you mahzik gerushato, it's also going to be mamzer. So the chaura of him, in the case of sota, it should be a mamzer as well. Hacha modu de'en v'lad mamzer. He agrees in this case. We have to see why. Now, according to the other rabbis that learned to be Akiva, that on a lab that's not she'ed, there's no karet, there's no mamzer. So for sure, we don't have to bring hadush. The hadush of this Gemara is even according to the opinions that say that there is a mamzer in the lab she'en ba she'ed. There's no relationship. Still, this is going to be no mamzer. We'll see why. And what the Gemara says, nida. You know why there's no isun mamzer on the nida? Or there's no result of mamzer in nida, tafsi ba kiddushin. Because kiddushin is tofes in the nida. How do we know kiddushin is tofes in nida? Shneimar utin nidata alav. Maz utin nidata alav. Afilu b'shat nidata tafsi ba kiddushin. Uti is lashon tehiyah kiddushin. Utin nidata. That even though she's in Nida, Kiddushin is over. Let's say a guy goes to a Nida, and he says, Areat, Mekudeshet, Betaba, Azu, Kedah, Moshe, Yisef. He Nida, Mekudeshet, Mekudeshet, Nida. So the reason why it doesn't bring him Mamzer, because Tapsi ba Kiddushin. So now we're learning that when do we say that we're going to bring a Mamzer according to those opinions? That's only where there's no, where it's not Jayach. The Kiddushin is not going to be hal. That she says, the Tafsi by Kiddushin, we read the second one. Nida, Dichtiv Uti Nidata Alab, Tihi, Lashon Habaya, the Kiddushin Alab. So that's the reason why a Nida is not going to bring a Mamzer. Now, what about Sota? Sota da tafsi ba kiddushin. What do you mean sota tafsi ba kiddushin? When you have a sota lady, I was married. Even after she commits the act of adultery, they're still married. We don't say that automatically the marriage is dissolved. How do we know? She needs a gift. So therefore, that's what it means tafsi ba kiddushin. That it doesn't break up the the marriage. She still needs a get. So therefore, in such a case, since the marriage is still viable, it's not going to bring a mamzer. Now she says that tapsi ba kedushin leisha le'af lehaj zinta lo pak'u mina kedusheha harishonim. Our original kedushin does not dissolve. The original kedushin is still there, and therefore, since the original kedushin is still there, it's not going to bring a mamzer. So there, again, we just said a big hadush that everybody's going to agree, even the opinions that said you have isur karet. But what is isur karet? Normally we say isur karet brings a mamzer because kiddushin is not tofes isur karet, right? Regular isur karet kiddushin is not tofes, but in nida, which is isur karet, kiddushin is tofes. So that's not going to bring a mamzer. And the isur lav, we said what? That's going to make a mamzer, even a lav that is no she'er. But in this case of a sota, we're going to say it will not bring a mamzer. Why? Because tapsi ba kedushin, as we said in the Braita coming up, Tanya Nameacher, akol modim be'ba'al nida ba'al sota, which means he went with his wife after she became a sota, be'al shomeret yabam. Now we're adding a new case now. Shomeret Yabam before Halitza. He went with the somebody went with a Shomeret Yabam. Now that's the Isur Lav over there because you're not allowed to go with Shomeret Yabam. She has to make Yibum. She's not allowed to go with somebody else. So therefore, she went with somebody else. That guy who went with her is Isur Lav. It's not going to make a mamzer. She'en avalad mamzer. That she's Shomeret Yabam. Le'ahad min hashuk. He went to a Islamic guy. Below Halitza. שאין הבלד ממזר, לכאורה that's a lav. ואפילו רבי עקיבא דפליג רבי מתאים וטעמם משום דקידושין תופסים בה. Again, because kiddushin is tofes in this lady. If a guy from the shuk went with a yebama before halitza, kiddushin, how do you know? לדאבקי רחמנא ללאו דידי בלשון הוויה. It says, לא תהיה אשת המת החוצה לאיש זר. This guy, this girl is not allowed to be with an ish zar. מה כתוב? קודם חליצה. זה לאו, ודאי. זאת אומרת, she's supposed to make ייבום או חליצה with ראובן. Came some guy, חנוך, from the shuk, and he married her. האם קידושים תופסים? כן, קידושים תופסים. Why? Because it says, לא תהיה. זאת אומרת, לא תעשה את זה, אבל אם תעשה את זה, יש הוויה. זה תופס. And she says, לא תהיה. מה זה לא תהיה? בת הוויה היא, ואחי כאמר, לא תהיה אשת המת, לא תתקדש את המת, בקידושין איסר, אבל if she does it, the kiddushin will be tofes. And therefore you see what? You see that kiddushin is tofes. So therefore the rule is over here. You have three cases. You have three cases over here. That the Gemara is saying that even though it's in Isur, and even though it's Isur Karet in one case, it will not bring a mamzer. Nida does not bring a mamzer. Why? Kedushin tofsi. What about sota? Sota is a lav. It's not a lav of she'er, but it doesn't matter. Since we say that she needs a get, so the kedushin is not nifka, so therefore it's not going to bring a mamzer. And what's the third case? Shomeret Yabam, because we say Kiddushin is tofes.
The guy from the shuk.
And it's not going to bring it's not going to make
drawing up everything we studied that you need to wait either for Halitza or for you.
No, we're still saying, why belong everything? We're not blowing everything. We're not saying the guy's a tzaddik.
Okay, בסדר, אבל...
אנחנו שואלים שאלה. ודאי היא זקוקה לייבום או לחליצה. עכשיו השאלה נשאלת. אם זה בא מן השוק וקידש, הוא עשה טעות, הוא רשע, כל whatever you want. ועכשיו אנחנו דנים על הבן, אם הבן ממזר או לא. אז since the pasuk says, לא תהיה, זאת אומרת, אם תעשה את זה, יהיה הבעיה, יהיה קידושין, therefore, if there's קידושין, it's not going to be a...
The connection to making Yibum is not strong enough to make the kid a mamzer. Because the shuk, the guy from the shuk is able to break whatever is there to create that kid won't be a mamzer. It's not
because kiddushin is tofes on a yibama.
Waiting.
Exactly. That's why the kid's not a mamzer. So now the Gemara comes along and says, Abaye, why didn't you list Shomeret Yabam? Abaye only listed 2 out of the 3, Sota, Benida. But the Braita listed Shomeret Yabam. So it says Shomeret Yabam is Satkale, Ikerav, Ikishmuel. Because he had a safek. Because there's a mahloket really between Rav and Shmuel. Is Kiddushin Topsin in a Yevama or not? Rashi comes along and says, Ikerav. David, read the Rashi, Ikerav.
Ikerav de'amad perek ha'isha rabba minayim she'en kiddushin tofsim b'yevama dechtiv lo tihye eshet hametz le'ish zad lo tihye b'havaya zad b'havad mamzer. Wow.
So Rav holds, when it says lo tihye, he learns it, lo tihye. זאת אומרת, Kiddushin lo yitfas. And therefore, if Kiddushin is lo tofes, then already it's going to be a mamzer. So therefore, if you hold like Rav, the kid actually is going to be a mamzer. But Shmuel, I am misupak b'dava. Shmuel said, I don't know if Kiddushin is tofes or not. So therefore, Ik Shmuel, the Amar.
Either
it's like Rav that says, Lo tiyeh, so to make Kiddushin will not be tofes, or Dilma. Right, from the fact that it said Lo tiyeh, why did it say tiyeh? It's much rather it is a Kiddushin. So therefore, Abaye did not want to add Yevamah to the list because he's misupak. Because maybe the halakha is like Rav, and if it's like Rav, the kid is a mamzer. And if the halakha is like Shmuel, the kid is a safek mamzer. And we know that we don't say safek mamzer is asur. And therefore, Shmuel, Abaye was misupak, but he didn't put it on the list because it's a safek mamzer. And the Torah says only Badai mamzer cannot come into the kahal, but safek mamzer can come into the kahal. So therefore, we did not list it on the cases over here where it's not going to make a mamzer, again, because it's possible that Kiddushin is not tofes, but it's possible according to Shmuel that Kiddushin actually is tofes. Okay?
Rabbi, when we say in general, the Biakiba holds, even when you're over a lav that's not karet, the child could be a mamzer. That's only in a case where the havaya, there's no kiddushin. Aren't there isn't there a lot that there is kiddushin like Masechet?
No, but Rabbi Akiva will hold. Rabbi Akiva will hold that kiddushin is not tofes b'chaybei lavin.
He holds it's not tofes.
Right.
So if someone goes with noseh halusato or he's over on lo yibneh, for example, that's a regular lav. So according to Rabbi Akiva, all those cases, there's no kiddushin?
Right. That's a big mahlok amongst the Tanaim. Is kiddushin tofsin b'chaybei lavin or not? So Rabbi Akiva will say the kiddushin is not tofes b'chaybei lavin. So that's why it makes a mamzer. The only exception we said is sota, because sota we see the kiddushin is there still. It didn't poke out the kiddushin, and then because you need to get, so therefore since the kiddushin is still there, it'll have it'll remove the mamzeru. And they all talk about that Rashi, by the way. Now that you're bringing it up, the Tosfot and others come along and say, "Kemochen tofsin ba kiddushin kishemegarsham machzira." Machzir gerushato, for example. Kiddushin is also tofes in that case. There's certain cases where kiddushin is tofes. In those cases, we're going to say that there's not going to be a mamzer. So he just says, "Al pi abanat Tosfot kan." V'hainu sheledat Rashi isura gorem shekiddushin lo yitapsu gam mafkiya kiddushin shekevar halu. V'lachen mekiddushea she'enam nifka'im mahmat isur sota. That since the kiddushin is not nifka from the isur sota, mukach shemochen tofsin ba kiddushin keshegirsha machzira. So therefore, it also we learned that if he divorced her and took her back, the kiddushin would be tofes. Not everybody agrees to that, but that's the opinion of Rashi. Again, that Rashi isur hagorem shekiddushin lo yitapsu. That any time you have an isur that the kiddushin will not be tofes, Gam mafkia kiddushin shekemar halu. It'll be mafkia even a kiddushin that already was hal.
Without a get.
Exactly. Without a get. ולכן, בקידושי שאינם נפקעים מחמת איסוס סוטה, and since the kiddushin is not nifka from isus sota, like we just said, mukach כמו כן תופסים בה קידושין כשגירשה ומחזירה, which means, let's say he divorced her and he took her back, right? That's the case, let's say, of a sota, that he took her back and he married her. So from the fact that you see that the kiddushin was not nifka, that shows that the kiddushin would be hal, and therefore, again, what's the case of sota? The case of sota was she's forbidden her, right? He's got to get rid of her. He's got to divorce her. So he divorced her, and now he took her back. What part? He took her back. How did he take her back? With kiddushin. Well, maybe the kiddushin is not hal. So that she says, "I'm proving to you that it's hal." From the fact that if he stayed married with her, he would need a get. So that shows you that there is a kiddushin there. So therefore, if he would remarry her, kiddushin would be hal as well. I was saying that. What's the case of sota? I'm going to speak this out clearer, just so we can speak it out clearer. Give it because I see Sakhan needs a clear. A guy's married to a lady. I'll get Mr. Mansour. Now he's married. Now whenever she becomes a sota, mazeh sota, she went with another guy. Edim, everything. In safek, in mesota. She's vadai eshet ish. Okay. At this point over here, what's the halacha say he has to do? Exactly. He has to give her a get and goodbye. And he gave her a get. He gave her a get. Goodbye. Now what happened? Now the she'elah is, let's say he takes her back. You're not allowed to take her back. You're not allowed to take her back. He took her back, and he went with her. That's the case if he went with sota. So this is isur lav. So the question is kiddushin tofsin in this hazara, mahzir sotato? Is this kiddushin tofes or not? Now, if kiddushin is not tofes, then it'll make a mamzer. But if kiddushin is tofes, so ech anu yod'in im kiddushin tofsim or no? So that she says a chetush. That she says before they got divorced. Now you have a man married to a sota. Does the kiddushin blow up automatically or needs a get? He needs a get. Oh, so from the fact that you see you need a get, that shows you there's a connection, even though she is a sota. So that teaches me that even if he would read Mekadesha, there's something there. There's a connection. That's the way that she learns. That's what argues, but that's the way that she learns. And therefore, the rule of Rabbi Akiva is, when did we say Isur Lav Mevi Mamzer? Zedavka Keshe'ena Kedushin Tofes. Abad Keshe'esh Kedushin. And from here you see the Sota Yesh Kedushin. From the fact that it's not Nifka. If he would go back and remarry her, it would work. You understand? Good. And the same thing with Nida. Nida, we know it. So therefore the question, and what? You have a third case. Shumeret Yamam. Now Shumeret Yamam is a mahmok, okay? That's why Abaye did not give the case of Shumeret Yamam. According to Rav and Kiddushin Tofsin, therefore the kid will be a mamzer. But according to Shmuel, he was mesupak. Therefore, he didn't get involved in discussing that case over there, because it's possible that Kiddushin will be tofes in such a case.
That's Rashi's opinion.
Yes.
In Rabbi Akiva holds, if you went and remarried, it's a mamzer for sure.
Well, we're saying it in Rabbi Akiva. No, we're saying this all in Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva that said yesh mamzer b'chayber lavin. That's only in the chayber lavin she'en kiddushin tofsin. Avadim kiddushin tofes kemo sota. And if she's just proving to you, how do I know the kiddushin is tofes in the sota? The fact that if you remain married, the kiddushin would need a get. So therefore that shows you that it's still a connection. So therefore if you would go out and remarry her, it's also a kiddushin. That's all that we're pointing out over here, Rabotai. Good. Now the Gemara says, Tane Shimon, Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Azai. Okay, what did Rabbi Shimon ben Azai say? He found the Megillat Yohasim Yerushalayim. Tane Shimon ben Azai Omer Matzati Megillat Yohasim Yerushalayim וכתוב בה איש פלוני ממזר לאשת איש. וכתוב בה משנת רבי אליעזר בן יעקב קו ונקי. And it says over here that the Mishnah said three things. Number one, it said that they found a mamzer from Eshet Ish. And then it said also that you should know whenever you see the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, his Mishnah is Kav, Mazeh Kav, measured. He doesn't have too many statements. Kav, yani it's b'midah. He doesn't have too many statements. But whenever he says something, Teda Alecha, Zenaki. So merit his Mishnah is clean, and therefore we take it. And number three, the Chatuv ba Menashe haraget Yeshaya. Wait. Menashe, the son of Hizkiah, killed his grandfather. Who's his grandfather? Yeshaya Hanavi. Rabotai, three things. Amar Rabba. Now the question is, why did Menashe kill his grandfather, the prophet? Understand what's going on now? Now we're going into a new subject. Now take a break. Take a break. Now we're going to go into a little Agadah. Why did Menashe kill his grandfather? But it says, Amar Rabba Medan Daine Vekatle. He judged him as a Navi Sheker. Why Navi Sheker? Amar Le, Menashe tells Yeshaya, Moshe Rabbach Amar, Ki lo yir'ani Adam b'chai. Moshe Rabbeinu said what? Lo yir'ani Adam. You cannot see a Kadosh Baruch Hu and live. Ve'at Amat, what did Yeshaya say? Va'ir'e et Hashem Yoshev al kiseh ram v'nisa. So I saw Kadosh Baruch Hu sitting on the kiseh. So Menashe came along and said, how could you see something that Moshe Rabbeinu says impossible to see? You must be Navi Sheker. Moshe Rabbach Amar, Mi kashem Eloheinu bechol kol enu elav. That we can call out to God in prayer anytime. Ve'at Amar dirshu Hashem behem maseo. And you said you can only call out to God when He is found. Sounds like what? That sometimes yes, sometimes no. The third count. Moshe Rabbach Amar et mispar yamecha amaleh. That sounds like a person lives according to the days that were given to him, a full life, but you can't get more. At Amar, do you remember when Hizkiah got a gezerah on him? Yeshaya gave him what? An extra 15 years. Ve'osafti al yamecha 15 shana. How could you add? The Torah says in mispar yamecha amaleh. Sounds like you get what you get, and you're going to come along now and go against that and add 15 more years. So now Rabotai, he got him on three accounts. Number one, how did you see when Moshe Rabbeinu says you can't see? Number two, how could you say that God is only found sometimes when Moshe Rabbeinu said bechol kodesh? And number three, how could you add years? Your time is your time. Amar Yeshaya. So why did Yeshaya answer? You don't think Yeshaya had an answer? Of course he had an answer. Amar Yeshaya yadana be they don't mekabel ma de Elmaleh. I know he's not going to accept what I tell him. The Elmaleh is shavye mezid. Wow. And if I answer him, and he's still going to kill me, now I made him a mezid. So he was more worried about Menashe than he's worried about himself. What did he do? Over here, Rabotai, we have the use of Kabbalah Ma'asit. Amar Shem. He said one of the Shemot. Ibla be'arza. And he disappeared. You hear this? He disappeared in a cedar tree. All of a sudden, abracadabra, he said a Shem, boom, he dies in the tree. The Menashe, he saw him. Where'd he go? At Yua the Arza. So the people who saw this, they took the tree and they brought it to Menashe. Unsaruha. He started to cut the tree. When the axe got to the mouth of Yeshaya, he was able to get him. I'll explain to you why. Mishum da Amar, one time the prophet Yeshaya spoke derogatorily about the Jewish people. It was mekatreg. I'm living amongst the people that their tongue is tameh. I didn't tell you to speak like that. Therefore, the Mekubalim write that when he used the Shem, it was able to cause his whole body to disappear, except in the part of the body that there was a pegam.
No.
And where was the pegam? In the mouth. And therefore, since there was a pegam in the mouth, he was able to get him in the mouth. And the Mefarshim say that how did they know that Menashe, how did Menashe know that Yeshaya was in the tree? So they saw brought down in the Sefarim, they saw his sisiyot was sticking out. The sisiyot did not go into the tree. The sisiyot were coming. We never see his tree with sisit. What kind of tree is this over here? So, must be the rabbis in there. And that's how they knew. Okay, Rabotai, read Rashi, Nesruha Lefumeh. First one.
ונחלת ש... ומשום הכי יענש ונסורי פומר, משום דקרינו לישראל עם תמה ספרתיים, בדעתו שלא ציווה לו הקדוש ברוך הוא, ולא מחמת תוכחה, דכתיב ואמר אוי לי כי נדמתי.
Right, he was talking on his own. He wasn't giving rebuke to the people even. So therefore, he got punished for that. Now the Gemara says, Mikol makom kashu kre'adade. Okay, Yeshaya didn't want to answer. But what's the answer? One pasuk says, Kelo yirani Adam. And then Yeshaya says, Vayre'eh. How do you answer it? Vayre'eh et Hashem kedetanya. Kol ha'nevi'im nistakelu baspakel haraya she'ena me'ira. Moshe Rabbeinu nistakel baspakel haraya me'ira. Deep stuff. There's different visions. Moshe Rabbeinu saw from a clear lens. That's called aspak haraya me'ira. And therefore, he had clarity in the vision. Mashe'enken in Yeshaya, it was called aspak haraya she'ena me'ira. Now, when you see from a lens that's not clear, it looks like you're seeing something, but you're not really seeing it. Moshe Rabbeinu knew he's not seeing anything because it was clear. So he didn't get mistaken. He said, Kelo yirani Adam. He knew that. Mashe'enken, if your lens is not clear, you think that you're seeing something. Not the difference. So when Yeshaya says Vayre'eh, he thought Vayre'eh because he was looking at aspak haraya she'ena me'ira. And therefore it looked like he was seeing, but he really was not seeing what he thought he was seeing. Moshe Rabbeinu knew already, Kelo yirani Adam, because his clarity, the vision was clear. So it's interesting, which we just chose. The clearer the vision, the more you know that you're not seeing anything. And it's the reverse. And the less clear, the more you think that you are seeing something. So the fact that he said by the air, that means he cannot see. Read Rashi the bottom. That's what Rashi says. They thought they were seeing, but לא ראו. ומשה right, Moshe knew he didn't see. You understand? Moshe ידע שלא ראה. Yeah, בגלל שזה היה מאירה, you could see clearly, and you could see clearly what you're not seeing. מה שאין אם יש משהו הכלל שאין מאירה, you טועה. So I saw it. חשבת שראית, אבל לא ראית. דרשו השם ממצאו. Now what do you do with the second pasuk? Yeshaya came along and said, only seek God when he's found. The Gemara says, biyachid, b'sibur. Oh, that when is he coming along to say? Biyachid. The Yeshua Hashem Be'ematzeh was talking about biyachid. What does it say? B'chol koreinu elav. B'chol koreinu elav means b'sibur, when you have a minyan. Interesting. So the Gemara says, "V'yachid emat." You're telling me that if a person goes v'yachid and he prays, his tefillah going to get answered? When is that time? So the Gemara says, "Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rav Abu, Elu Asrei Yamim shebeno Shchoah Shana Yom Kippurim." Rabotai, this is a good siman. Which parasha are we reading this week? Haremot. It's Yom Kippur this week. Aseri Miteshuvah already. So therefore, we're talking about Aseri Miteshuvah. Ze inyane parasha gorem. That Aseri Miteshuvah, what do we say? That the Yachid has a din of a sibur. It's a bechadush. If a person normally wants to get his tefillot to be answered, let him go with the sibur. Right? Mashiach doing Aseri Miteshuvah, Harambam writes. The Yachid is like a sibur. Now, could you imagine sibur be'aseri Miteshuvah? That's very exponential. And that's what we say. The Yeshua Hashem Maseo. But Mefarshim explained this Gemara in a deeper way. It sounds like the Yeshua Hashem Maseo is coming to give you advice. What's the advice? There's 10 days a year, and therefore, take advantage. Yeshua Hashem Matzeo is a good advice. But some say that this is not only advice. This is actually an azhara. It's a warning. As it's a warning. There's a famous Gemara that we learned in Yoma. One time, it says the butcher got into a fight, a mahloket with Rabbi. It was mechutzaf, the butcher. So what happened? It was before Kippur. And Rabbi didn't want the butcher to go into Yom Kippur with, this avon. So Rabbi went to the butcher shop. And he stood outside. What did he think, Rabbi? He figured the butcher will see him. And he made it easy for him. So when the butcher came out, he sees the rabbi standing there. He says, I have nothing to tell you. Keep on walking. So when the students saw Rabbi go there, they said, Rabbi went to kill the butcher. When did Rabbi went to kill the butcher? The second the butcher went back into the shop, he was cutting the bones. A bone came, got him right there. What's the explanation? Explanation is, you see from this Gemara, that when it's easy for you to make teshuvah, and you don't, now that's already a mekatrek. Rabbi made it easy, he was there. All you had to do was go out and say, Hadati. And you didn't take advantage of that. So now already you're putting yourself in danger. So the prophet is saying like this, during Asirim when Yeshua Hashem comes down and is walking in the street. So now if you tell God during Asirim Yeshua, now you're sakana. Now you're telling Borei Olam, keep on walking after Shalom. So therefore the prophet was not just giving you advice, Yeshua Hashem, the tzivui. That be careful if you're not going to make the teshuvah during this Asirim Yeshua over here, you're putting yourself in the same sakana that Rabbi put the butcher in.
ובגלל זה עשו את זה ביחיד מותר, כי גם אם הוא עסוק, וחשכה שלום להגיע למניין,
exactly, Hashem's there. Exactly, the Shekhinah's there. Normally it takes minyan to bring the Shekhinah down. However, the Masechet Teshuvah, Shekhinah po. Exactly, the Shekhinah po. No excuses. Now the Gemara says, Et Mespar Yamecha Amaleh. Now what does it mean over here? Et Mespar Yamecha Amaleh. And then Yeshaya added to Hizkiah 15 years. Tana'ehi. Et Mespar Yamecha Amaleh. Elu Shene Dorot. These are referring to over here the two Dorot, the years that they give a person at the time that he's born. When a person is born, they give him a certain amount of years. Zakah, if he has a zechut, mashtimim lo. He'll live all the years. Lo zakah pohatim lo. Wow. So therefore, even though they gave him the shnei dorot, the years of his life, it can be diminished. That's the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. So therefore, you can never live longer. At most, you could live
years or less.
But you can't live more. Rachamim omrim, no zakah, mosifim lo. No zakah pohatim lo. No, it works both ways. Im yesh lo zechut, אבל מוסיף יוסיף או לא, ואם לא, פועטים. אמרו לו לרבי עקיבא, הרי הוא אומר, והוספתי על ימיך 15 שנה. So they told Rabbi Akiva, how can you say you can't add? Yoshaya added 15 years to the life. אמר תזכייה. אמר להם, משלו הוסיפו לו. מה זה משלו? These were Hizkiah's years from the beginning. Which means what happened? They took away the 15 years, and now he gave it to them back. It wasn't getting extra 15 years. It was just giving him back what was taken away. Teda. Sheharei Navi Omed Umitnabeh. Which means more than 200 years before Hizkiah, the Navi was Mitnabeh to Yerovam ben Nebat, which was the first king. Hine ben Nolad lebet David, Yoshia Shemo. There's going to be a man that's born. His name is Yoshia. Yoshia was the son of Menashe. ועדיין לא נולד מנשה, which is the grandfather of Yoshia, actually. So therefore, how can you give a prophecy that there's going to be a man called Yoshia where Menashe wasn't even born yet? And the pshat was, everybody knew he was supposed to live those years. Those were the years of Yeshaya. Yeshaya was supposed to be mad and lived an extra 50, not an extra 50 years. Those 50 years belonged to him. And if he was going to have a son, Menashe, Menashe would have a grandson, Yoshia. And therefore, when Hizkiah got sick, his years were not complete. And when he made teshuvah, they completed his years. Read Rashi. Zakah mosifim lo. Right. When it says it's mispar yamecha amaleh, according to Hakamim, it means amaleh, not I will complete. Ani osif. Mispar yamecha amaleh, you will get more. Mishelo osifu lo.
אלא שמתחילה היו רוצים לפחות משניו.
תדע.
שמתחילה כשנולד נפסקו לו כל אותו תוספת, שהרי נביא נתנבא בימי ירבעם, שנים הרבה קודם. הנה בן נולד בבית אבי יאשיהו שמו, ובשעת חוליו של חזקיה עדיין לא נולד מנשה, שממנו יצא יאשיהו, ואומר בשעת חוליו גזרו לפחות משניו, וכשזכה השלימו לו.
Right, which means what happened? Already hundreds of years before they prophesied there's going to be a man that comes from David, called Yoshia. Yoshia was not born, obviously, at that time. Now what happened? Hizkiah got sick. And Menashe was not born yet. Ela, what's the pshat? That really those years were supposed to be belonging to Hizkiah, because it says already Yoshia was supposed to be born. But when he got sick, they took away those years after the Gezerah, and then they returned them to him. Because we knew he had those years, because already before they were prophesying he's going to have a son, a grandson. Now, why did they give him 15 years about that? Anybody know why they gave? Why did they take 15 years? Because what was the sin of Hizkiah?
Not married.
Hazak Baruch, he didn't get married. And Yeshaya came along and said, listen, and therefore, that's not a good thing. You have to be So he said, okay, maybe you give me your daughter. He ended up marrying Yeshaya's daughter. That's why Menashe is his grandfather. So the Ben Ish Chai says, because when a person gets married, says Ish v'isha shezachu shechina b'nehem. Mazu shechina yudke. And there was since he did not involve himself in the yudke, 15. They took away 15 years of his life, keneged the yudke. And once he made the tikkun, so they brought the yudke back. Now there's a very, very interesting over here. Why would the prophet not get married? So it says because he saw that his children are going to be Risha'im. So the prophet came along and said, but are you looking at the future over here? But what did he tell him? He said, Ki met ata velo tehye. Maze met ata? Met ata ba'olam hazeh velo tehye le'olam haba. So Hizkiah said, Ma yikul lehai. Met ata ba'olam hazeh lo le'olam haba. V'b'deh shelo asakta b'periyah v'rebiyah. So he asked a simple question. Where do you see that if a person is not osik with periyah v'rebiyah, in the chachadik le'olam haba? Isn't periyah v'rebiyah a very big mitzvah? The first mitzvah, not tohu bera'ah. It's we sell the Sefer Torah for periyah v'rebiyah. Okay, we have we free the guy so he can be osik with periyah. We know Torah is very serious. Where do you see in Shas? So how could the prophet come along now and tell Hizkiah, Kimet ata velo tehye? So he once explained it like this. It says that when a person has children, Bera kirad da'abu. The child is the legs of the father. The legs of the father. After the father dies, he goes to Olam Haba. He is where he is. That's it. After a person dies, you cannot move anymore. However, if you left children into the world, when they do mitzvot, they become the legs of the father. The father moves to the deeds of the child. And therefore the tzaddikim, afilu b'mitatam nikraim hayim. Why? Because they have their children, and they taught their talmidim, they taught their children especially, and therefore the children keep them moving. However, if a person dies without having children, so now when the person dies, he's dead. He has nobody to move him. And that's what the prophet Yeshaya was telling him. Kimet ata ba'olam hazeh v'lo tihyeh le'olam haba. Meaning you'll have olam haba, but v'lo tihyeh. You're not going to have anybody to move you. Look, once you get to olam haba, you're going to be stuck. So to that, Hezkiah answered, but I see that it's going to be the Sha'im. So if it's going to be the Sha'im, what's going to help me in olam haba? Not going to help me. She said, that's God's business. That's God's business. You were commanded to have children, and therefore you have no options to delay it. There's an amazing Orachim HaKadosh in this week's parasha, which is the parasha of Arayot. If you look at the way the Torah introduces parashat Arayot, it says, "Ve'et mishpatai ta'asu, ve'et hukotai tishmoru." The Bnei Yishai says, "Is it mishpat po?" We're talking about Arayot. Arayot is not a mishpat. Arayot is a hok. So what is it saying? It mishpatai tishmeru. It mishpatai ta'asu. V'et hukotai tishmeru. There's no mishpat over here. So he says, so the person knows the Gemara in Sanhedrin. The Gemara Sanhedrin says that when a person gets involved in Arayot, it's an addiction. People think, let me give in, and then I'll get satiated, and then get it off my head. But the Gemara says the opposite. Must be all ra'ib. That the more a person satiates himself, the more hungry he gets. It's the opposite. Person thinks, let me eat, finish, then my appetite will be done, I'll be over. The next day, he's twice as hungry. The only way to get rid of this yetzer is what? Is mar'ibo. You have to starve the craving, and when you starve it long enough, what happens? The craving goes away. Mar'ibo sabeya. So therefore, says the Orachim HaKadosh, something beautiful. He says, a guy might say to himself, you know what? I don't want to get involved in Arayot, Hasbe Shalom. I don't want to get close to Arayot. I don't want to even taste it. I don't want to even have any connection to it. Therefore, what? I'm not getting married. I don't want to get married. Because why? Once I get married, already I'm tasting it. And from this, it's going to... So a guy might want to be tzaddik harbeh, and he wants even deprive himself from the mitzvah of piriyah v'riviyah. So therefore, the pasuk says, no, et mishpatai ta'asu. Don't be too much a tzaddik. Et mishpatai ta'asu. Don't become so mahmir, you're not going to get married. You have to fulfill the mishpat. The first mishpat, the Torah, peru urvu. But still keep the arayot. You have to guard yourself, but you shouldn't think that because you want to be so mahmir that you're not going to get married as a result of it. No. Surah says you have to get married. Finally, Rabbanan, the pasuk comes along and says that the 15 years, that what? Mi ketiv mehizkiah lebet David ketiv. Mehizkiah nolad imi inish acharina. Which means, Rabbanan say that the 15 years actually were added to Hezkiah. They were not his years. But it says in the beginning pasuk that they predicted even before he was born that it's going to come out of David. So that's the Gemara's point. It doesn't say it's going to come out of Hezkiah. It says it's going to come out of David from somebody else. And therefore, you have no idea. The whole proof was what? They predicted that from David's going to come Yoshiyah. So that means from the beginning, Hezkiah had these years. And they must have been taken away. He says, no, it never said it's going to come from Hezkiah. It's from Bet David. It won't come from Hezkiah. Yoshiyah will come from somewhere else. So therefore, you see, according to the Banan, the years were actually added to him. And now the Gemara concludes, Ishto shemeta mutar ba'achota. Yivimto shemeta mutar ba'achota. Amar Rav Yosef, kan shana lebi Mishnah she'ena Sidicha, which means he said that this Mishnah is Ena Sidicha, which means Rabbi wrote this Mishnah, but it's a Mishnah she'ena Sidicha. Why? It's a pasuk in the Torah. The pasuk says that you're not allowed to take achot isha bechayeha. that she says, Mishnah she'ena silicha. Rabbi does not have to quote me things that are befirush pesukim in the Torah. It says in the Torah, be'ayeha. So the Gemara comes along and says that if this is a case over here, that the Rabbi Yehuda Nasi gave us a Mishnah, she'ena silicha. Now the Tosfot over here comes along and says, Shana Rabbi Mishnah she'ena silicha, Pirush HaKon Teraz, Dezil Kari Berav. Right? Go open the Pasuk, open the Chumash. What do you want over here? Bekasha de Bechama Mekomot Shoneh Atan Amash Bepasuk, Beferush. He's I don't know what you're talking about. There's many cases like this. Lama Ze Rak Davka Kan. Many times a big quotes a Mishnah that says Beferush Pasuk. Ye'od de Girsha Umeta Mutar Ba'otai Tzarich Lemedak Halo Meta Asira. What do you mean? It's not a Mishnah She'ena Sedicha. I explained the Mishnah, if you remember, that you need the Hadush in the second case. That if he divorced her, he still has to wait until she dies. That's a Hadush. The Torah doesn't mention that case. I would have thought that maybe once he divorces her, she's permissible. Kamash no. So it's not a Mishnah She'ena Sedicha. The Yibimto he Mishnah She'en Sedicha. The Keman de Tana Ishto Kol Sheken Yibimto. Tosfot learns one case is extra. The case of Yibimto, Mazi Yibimto, his wife, the Ishto. So therefore, if you're telling me that you're not allowed to go Ishto, so therefore Tosfot says Kol Sheken Yibimto, which means what? I guess because Yibimto is what? His wife. So therefore, what do you have to tell me the case of Yibimto?
When he takes her, it's his wife.
Because it takes his wife. Yibimto already is asur, by the way. Yibimto is Ahot Isha, which is she's asur already than before. So Kol Sheken, this lady who's asur from the beginning is his sister's going to be asur. She's worse than a regular wife. A regular wife is permissible, no question about it. This Yibimto was already asur from the beginning because it's Ahot Isha, it's Ishet Ach. And therefore, if a regular lady that was always permissible to you, her sister is forbidden, this lady that's forbidden to you outside of Yibum, so Kol Sheken, her sister is going to be forbidden to you. So what do you have to tell it to me for? That's the part that's considered a Mishnah. So it's not going on the regular case. The Rashid is going on Ahot Isha. What does that mean? Ahot Isha. The Mishnah many times gives you things that are befirush. And anyway, it's not extra because you need the case of Girusha. And what's the Hadush? The superfluous case is Yibimto, because I can learn a Kol Sheken from Ishto. Okay, Adran Alak, Aholet, Beautiful.